What's up, y'all? Naturegirl 30 here. Now, I just got finished watching The Killing Joke on pay-per-view, and I'm just gonna say this. I understand why a lot of people do not like it, and I understand why a lot of people do. Now, I don't really have a lot of beef with The Killing Joke. I think it's a really great psychological thriller, and I still to this day don't know why they call it The Killing Joke, because the ending definitely plays with your head, which shows it was a really, really, really great, I guess I don't want to say cartoon, but it was like a really great show to watch. Now, it's always good to hear Mark Hamill as the voice of Joker, as well as Kevin Conroy as the voice of Batman. They did have a different voice for Commissioner Gordon, and they had Tara Strong actually voice Barbara Gordon, or Batgirl. Now, a lot of people didn't like the whole sex scene and how they treated Batgirl and how they had the sociopath after Batgirl. Now, I don't mind that because it reminds me a lot of Batman the Animated Series. It's probably one of those filler episodes of Batman the Animated Series that I enjoy, because even if it's a filler episode for Batman the Animated Series, it's still amazing to watch. And there was never a dull moment for me when that series was on the air. So I didn't mind it at all. But it did feel like it was two separate movies in one. And I understand why people are like, okay, just get to The Killing Joke, because you wanted to get straight to the comic for those who actually read the comic book. I did not read the comic book, so I absolutely have no idea how it's supposed to go. So I just went in completely with fresh eyes. So I enjoyed it even in that way. But when it came to the sociopath, I'm not going to lie, he was a very clever villain. He was not one of those boring filler villains that didn't know what he was doing. He was a pretty clever villain that was a bit narcissistic and actually did like Batgirl. And even though Batgirl treated it as a game, and that was the one thing that Batman kind of brought out. He was like, you treat this as a game, while I've already crossed into the abyss and can't look back. You have the option to go back. Well, he didn't say that verbatim, but that's pretty much what the whole thing was. I understand why they added an extra 30 minutes of Batgirl and Batman together, because they wanted you to feel for her after what happens to her, but it really wasn't needed. The thing of it is that even if they did have those scenes together in the first 30 minutes, and even though they added Batgirl in there still wasn't a lot of chemistry between them. There was more chemistry between Batman and Joker than it was with Batman and Batgirl. Now, the sex scene itself, it was nothing to even be angry about or upset about. It wasn't love involved. It was lust, and you can tell it was. In the heat of the moment, emotions ran high and stuff happens. That happens. Now, the one thing that bugs me about this entire movie, and the same thing happened with Deadpool, is that it was rated R, but it wasn't R. Like, it didn't go all the way like R movies used to go all the way. Now, the one thing that bugged me about The Killing Joke is there was a lot of scenes that they could have added in there to make it not only a lot more visual, but to make it a lot more emotional, to capture and grip the actual viewer. Especially the scenes on what happened to Barbara Gordon. Now, leading on up to that point, oh my gosh, it was amazing to actually see Joker on screen. And I know a lot of people actually did have issues with the actual animation as well as the drawing. They did go between digital and then they went to hand drawing, but I don't mind that because everybody has a different way to portray their art. And their art actually portrays either the emotion of the character or the atmosphere around them. So I'm fine with something like that. And I love what they did with the Joker. The Joker was terrifying. He was nightmare fuel incarnate. I could not watch him without just creeping out. Seriously. Batman reminded me of the classic Batman the Anime Series, except the top of his head for some reason was round, and his ears were pointed like horns instead of like out to the side. But it doesn't really matter. I mean, they did a great job with drawing. They did make Barbara Gordon, of course, look cute. And it actually did make Batman seem a little bit more dark, brooding, and just, you know, just completely, I don't want to say sinister, but they made him a lot darker and a lot harder and a lot tougher than they did in the animated series. So I'm kind of fine with that. I really am. But good grief, was Joker nightmare fuel. Seriously. Now, going back to what I said about it being R. The one thing that kind of bothered me about this movie being R is that it did not feel like it was R. It felt like it was a PG-13 movie. When it came to our movies, yes, you could have tons of profanity, tons of nudity, tons of extreme violence, tons of gore, and tons of blood. Yes, we saw blood. We barely had profanity. It was mild. We had nudity, but it was covered up. It was like Playboy back in probably in the 90s on how Playboy, I mean, it's kind of more like Playboy compared to Hustler. And I know you guys are like, how you know about that? Come on now. But other than that, it was a very mild version of, I mean, literally, it made Deadpool seem like an X-rated movie. And I actually did talk to my friend Irvin about this. And he actually did touch on that point. Deadpool was an X-rated movie compared to this. Seriously. Don't slap an R on it if you're not going to go all the way. They couldn't even drop the F-bomb. Maybe they had like a few other profanities here and there. Like, I mean, but honestly, they couldn't even drop the F-bomb. Let alone show any nudity. There were scenes where you actually did have a wing or an extra hand like covering up the body parts. Like just so slightly. And I'm like, if you're going to call yourself an R, for crying out loud, you at least show a butt or two. And I'm not saying that I really am all upset about not being in nudity, but I'm saying if you're going to say something is R, go all out with it. Don't be all docile about it. When it came to Deadpool, I had issues with Deadpool too. But it wasn't as bad because Deadpool was really a great movie. But it was more of a soft R than a hard R. And I'd rather have a hard R because that's what R is. It's hard. Seriously. But we didn't get any of that for this. Shoot, not even Joker cursed. I mean, he cursed a few times, but it was more like PG-13 than anything else. But speaking of the Joker, I will always love Mark Hamill's voice as the Joker. You can just tell how much emotion that man puts into that voice. But it did bring the whole psychological aspect with the Killing Joke. And it actually did kind of make you think about what really happened at the very end of the movie. Did he or didn't he? And they didn't really answer that. Plus, when it comes to Hope with Joker's background, it was one of his backgrounds, I believe, of the fact that he actually did have a wife that was pregnant and he couldn't make ends meet. And something happened to her and he actually did have, well, you know, stuff went on like that. And it did talk about that, you know, everything can happen if you just have one bad day. This was pretty much the cartoon version of Falling Down, minus the killing spree, minus the shooting people, shooting minorities, and just freaking going crazy and going off on the world. He pretty much was after only one person, and that was Batman. The one thing that freaked me out about the Joker was how he shot Barbara Gordon. I mean, sorry, spoiler alert for those that don't really know about the Killing Joke. Yes, he shot Barbara Gordon. But how he did it and where he aimed was the most disturbing for me. This played with my head throughout the entire movie. And I'm like, oh my gosh. This is an amazing psychological thriller. And in cartoon form. And I know a lot of people don't necessarily see it that way. I have not read the comic. I'm only going by the movies. But the movie itself, psychologically, was amazing. The fact that it was able to play with your head and make you think, did he or didn't he at the very end, was well done. Sure, it had a bit of a few issues and maybe scrapes that could have not been in there when it came with Barbara Gordon. But I understand why they did it. Now, when it comes to Barbara Gordon, a lot of people were not happy in how that her character was portrayed. Now, I don't consider her to be weak or frail or fragile. I consider her to be human. She's still a pretty tough person, but she's confused about how her feelings are with Batman, and it was acknowledged in Batman Beyond when Barbara Gordon was a lot older. Now, this was after the death of Jason Todd, and also between the death of Jason Todd and the Red Hood. So I think that's where it was going at this point. But honestly, I think it was great. I don't think that Barbara Gordon was portrayed as weak. I think she was still a strong character, but she was just emotionally confused and fragile, like any other woman confused about a man that they care about. The same exact thing with Batman. Batman did not want to get close because he did not want her to go into to cross that level to where you stop caring. He wanted her to stay out of the abyss and not be driven into it. And he actually did care about her, but not in a romantic sense. So I don't think that the whole sex scene was necessary. That could have been taken out. And other than that, it could have been more of a father and daughter dynamic. That's how I could possibly see it, and that's how it should have been. But other than that, this was not bad. This actually was a very good, well done, well thought out psychological thriller. And even though it added an extra 30 minutes in there, it didn't affect much for me. And I guess because I am not a diehard comic book fan, I do love comics, but I'm not so diehard with it, and I have not read any DC comics. So it's probably a different viewing for me than those that actually did read the comic itself. But other than that, guys, I enjoyed it. I think it was great, and I want to hear your thoughts. For those that actually did see The Killing Joke, how do you feel about it? Did you like it? Did you think it was bad? I want to know what your thoughts are, and leave it in the comments below. Naturegirl 30 signing off. Peace out. Later.